The Hangout on Air is live, I think. We will see. Welcome. Those of you who are there, I see 0 viewers. Just wait, I guess. 1 viewer. All right. Hello there. 9 viewers. All right, we're in business. So here I am. It's our second of these language workouts, which is an experiment, and it's done in conjunction with our 90-day challenge. And I will be continuing my twice weekly 90-day challenge videos. I'll be doing one after this session. But and also, so a couple of things here. First of all, some of the comments, some suggesting that maybe we could make these more interactive. I'm very open to the idea of making them more interactive. I don't know how to make them more interactive. If we have 50, 60, 100 people, it's very difficult for me to answer everybody's question. If there is some technology out there where I could ask questions and people vote on different subjects and somehow the statistic shows up as to what people are thinking and so forth, that would be fine. If anyone can suggest such a thing, I'd be very open to it. So obviously we'd like to make it more interactive. You're free to ask questions, and I do get to see the questions, and I'll try to answer them as we go forward. Now, today it's going to be Arabic. As you know, my 90-day challenge is Farsi and Arabic. I'm going to do basically Mondays and Wednesdays are Arabic and Fridays are Farsi, but you may be studying any language. And today I want to talk about something that relates to a video that I did a while ago about, short-term objectives or strategies in language learning and longer term. So I'm going to show you how I use LingQ, and then I'm going to try not to make it too loud so that people who are studying on their own can do what they want. But obviously, I have an Arabic discussion at 11. I may even record a bit of it just to show you. And so I find that the mini stories, which I've listened to many, many times, help prepare me for my discussion. So that's a short-term objective. But I know that if I don't get into the more difficult texts, like political texts, then I won't increase my vocabulary. So on the one hand, it's good to go over, especially the mini stories, which have so much sort of the most frequent vocabulary. And it's always, I would say, humbling to go back to some story that you've listened to 30, 40 times. And where you all those words you think you know, and you go back there and you find you don't know them again. I mean, we mustn't underestimate our ability to forget things that we have learned. And there's nothing wrong with that, because when you relearn it, it comes back stronger. But the amount of exposure and speaking and involvement and immersion in the language that we need in order to have things really become natural to us, it takes a lot. But again, the mini stories have the advantage that you're going over the basic structures of the language so often that they just become natural, and you don't have to think of the rules because you're training yourself to think of something as natural. So with that, and without further ado, I am going to share my screen and show you in specific terms what I'm talking about. So let us go here, start screen share, present to everyone. I'm assuming that you can see my screen. So if I look at my lessons in Arabic, so I have, for whatever, I started out uploading France 24, had someone do the transcripts for me. Then we did a better version of it. So I have 2. I sometimes get confused as to which is which. And you'll see that here, 32% of the words are blue, are unknown, are new to me. So here is where I can go in and really start to increase my vocabulary, start to expose myself to more words. And of course, my goal is to get there, because when I can download podcasts from France 24 or from Al Jazeera and actually understand it, then I'll be listening to things that are interesting, and I'll no longer be deliberately learning the language. I'll be learning the language through things that are of interest to me. However, I'm not there yet. If I listen, I can work my way through something, which I'm going to do on Wednesday, by the way, is work my way through, creating a lot of new links. but I'm not going to do that today. Today I'm going to show you how I mine, how you can use linking as a way to become more and more familiar with the basic structures and the basic vocabulary of the language. So leaving these aside then, but again, I just wanted to point out that I am guided by these little numbers. So there's here, for example, there are 2,300 words that I have previously saved, links that I'm in the process of learning, but there's another 1,640 words that are completely new to me. Whereas if I go into my Link mini stories, which is where I'm going to go, there's not that many new words, and there's a bunch of words, 400 some yellow words that probably I'm getting close to where I can use them. So let's open this up and see what we have here. Now, what I often do is I go through these. I mean, I have listened to these, as you'll see, 62 times I've listened to this story. All right. So I'm not going to go there, but I tend to look for the ones where there are more yellow words. In other words, that I haven't yet learned. And in particular, because I was just doing, cleaning up. First of all, I made breakfast and I cleaned up after breakfast. And I was listening to the more difficult stories that I've listened to less often. So I'm going to go pick one here at random here. We'll go to number 59. And let's just open that up. And it says there's only 7 new words, but I'm going to show you how you can, go back and review stuff.
الكتب.
Okay. So if I open this up, I have listened to this 22 times. I was just listening to it. I've listened to it 22 times. It says so right here, 22 times. Read it, it says once because I'm too lazy to add, but actually I have read it many times. The listening is automatic. It comes from the playlist. It says here, added to playlist. But I don't really keep track of how often I've read it. I should, but I don't. Now, so first thing I can do, and I sometimes do this when I'm reviewing something that I'm fairly familiar with, I will just go through reviewing the links. So that's one thing I could do. Sometimes I will just go through reviewing the links and I won't reread it. But normally I'll review the links, then I'll go through read it again. Sometimes with the audio on, audio is here, and sometimes without the audio on. But the other thing that I think is very useful is because a lot of these lessons contain some very good basic structures in the language. So Fatima, Fatima عادت على أن. So she is used to doing something. She used to do something. So, I might say, this is something that I want to review again. So used to.
على.
Wait a second.
اعتادت على أن. اعتادت على أن.
So what I'm doing is I'm creating phrases that I'm going to review again. See, I'm adding them to my review number here. I'm not 8 links that I need to review. So what I would do is I would go through and create a bunch of phrases. Now, so لم تكون موجودة حتى. So for whatever reason, I decided I knew that phrase, but if I go there
موجودة
and
لم تكن موجودة حتى.
So I might just
لم تكن موجودة حتى.
I don't know why I'm getting that echo. I should point out that I normally do this work on my iPad, and so I'm not as familiar with how it all works on the, but if it's still showing in white, because it's shown as known, but I want to review it again,
لم تكن موجودة حتى.
then I have to change the number. So people often ask, if you, for whatever reason, something's moved to known, what do? Well, it's not a problem. I can move it back to unknown. So, al-kutub.
الكتاب.
Al-kitab. Okay, I got that wrong. So I can move it back. I move them back and forth at will.
تكن. لم تكن موجودة حتى.
And كل كل what المعد الكراهة كل المعد
المواد
مواد الكراهة
المواد المقروءة
reading
المواد المقروءة المواد المقروءة.
So I am going through and picking up phrases that I'm going to review again when I go through my links. So let's just pick a couple more here. وما ذلك الآن هناك تاريخ أخرى. Let's see, تاريخ أخرى. هناك تاريخ أخرى كراهة. تاريخ أخرى. So it's a different way of reading. So again.
أخرى. طرق أخرى للقراءة. طرق أخرى للقراءة.
Okay. So.
السنوات. طرق أخرى للقراءة. طرق أخرى للقراءة.
There's some weird stuff happening. I must say, I do it on the iPad. I don't have any of these issues. I'm not sure why.
طرق أخرى للقراءة.
Okay. So, and you can go to the next page.
لحظة.
So, Stathia. I'll just let that ring. So the point is, once you've done that.
Call from Richard C.A.
Just a second. So, now, remember, you can set your review settings and make sure you set them. You know, first of all, I like to see everything on the front of the flashcard because I don't like to work too hard. So I just like to see it in front of me. I'm not going to do the close test. I'm going to do multiple choice, which is the easiest. And I'm going to do the dictation. All right. So close. So then we go into reviewing these. Oh, I don't know.
لحظة. لحظة.
It's unfortunate. I must say I haven't been on the browser version, but I'm seeing that there are some things that don't work properly on the browser version. The iPad version works fine. Let's go here, see what happens. I wonder why that is. I don't know if other people have a similar problem. Lahza moment, so lahza moment, submit. Next.
متوفرة.
متوفرة. I can't remember. Available.
الكتاب.
There's the book. I don't know what's happening here. Yeah, I apologize because I don't do this here. Either because I'm clumsy or doing it wrong, or there seem to be things that don't work properly on the browser that work very well on the iPad. What can I say? All right, I'm going to change tracks here. Let's go. And so what I was going to show you is that you have to be flexible in your use of your links. That you can, you know, go through, clear out all the words, think you kind of know them, go back and find that you don't know them, go back and save more phrases, then review the phrases. And actually, one thing I was going to show you, but I won't, is that with phrases, especially with phrases, you can use the dictation function. And so you're forced to type out in the language you're learning the phrases that you hear. So, you know, and then you also, of course, the reverse flashcard. So the sort of variety of activities in those flashcards are very helpful for trying to nail things down. Nailing things down, which is, of course, an illusion because you never nail things down. It's, you know, the short-term type of activity, but the longer-term type of activity is when you go after difficult texts. So if we go through here, this, for example, obviously has 26% unknown words. So this is going to be difficult for me. So I'm going to, for the next little while, quietly go through this, acquiring new words, or at least starting the process by saying them. And you can follow along or not as you wish.
لحضورنا سيتجول
I don't know why we're getting this echo.
سيتجول بالطبع لعرض الفراشة يكشف
I'm going to turn off the sound. It's annoying. Now I'm using the arrow keys, but you can also do it, you know, if you just want to go after the blue words, you can use your cursor. But I like to go through the yellow words as well. And I'm not worried too much about understanding the whole text. I want to go through and clean up all the blue words, kind of quickly review the yellow words, and then I'm going to go back in and read it. And this one is not a word, so I'm just going to give it the ignore treatment, ignore word, bingo. Now, one thing is that some of these words may be not an accurate or a useful translation, and I'll discover that when I reread it the second time, and then I will go and consult a dictionary if I don't like whatever the hint is here. So there's nothing permanent about a hint, and if it's a totally inappropriate hint, I'll remove it and I'll put something in more useful that I got from a dictionary. But I personally like to go through and kind of remove all the blue words, review the yellow words before I get in there and really start reading it. And then after having read it once or twice, I'll try and listen to it, still won't understand it, go back and read it again. But I am adding potential, words that I can potentially learn to my database of yellow links. And I'll be going back in there many times to review them in different ways. But again, this is plowing forward into difficult material, trying to set myself up to where I can actually listen to these and enjoy them while I'm on my bicycle or whatever. And I know that I've got a long way to go. This is the old upside down hockey stick situation where I'm on the long shaft of the hockey stick. It's a long road to get to where I can understand these things. Whereas with the mini stories, it's that steep initial period, that steep blade where we're trying to get a sense of the language, how the language works, key phrases, key verbs. And of course, if we're preparing to speak, if we need to speak, then we put more time into that process, which slows us down in terms of our acquiring more vocabulary. In the long run, we need to do both. And so depending on our needs, then we focus on one or the other. Now, some of these words, as I look at them, I know them really. Koa is strength and ha is her. Kautaha, but I've turned off the text-to-speech, which I use often to help me with the pronunciation of the words in Arabic. I've turned it off because we're getting that echo. But when I go back in there, I will look at these individually again more carefully. And again, you know, it says hadafaha, hadafiha, goal is new, but the ha is an ending, which means her, and I'm familiar with that. So these words, I'm starting to gain some familiarity with them. They have components that I'm starting to get familiar with. When I go back in, as I say, I'm going to work these words harder so that eventually there'll be fewer yellow words on the page and more white words. So this isn't very interesting, but just to give you a sense of what I do, you can be doing the same in your own studies. You know, I recommend that you spend time on both. That you spend time on the steep hockey blade, the early portion, really learning, forgetting, rewording, reviewing the verbs and the most common verbs, the phrases, so that the grammar starts to become natural to you. When I listen to many stories 30, 40 times, I always notice phrases and structures that I kind of had learned before, but learned them theoretically, and eventually they just start to seem natural, and the meaning just comes naturally without me having to think. Whereas here, it's much harder going through learning new words. The second time I go through this, I'll be making sense of it. And even if I make sense of it, when I listen to it, I won't really understand it that well. But that's just the process that you have to go through. So I don't know if there are any questions. Maybe we could, you know, if there are any questions, I could answer them now. If not, I will continue with this. Again, questions or even suggestions in terms of how you find these workouts and how we can make them more useful. Also on Wednesday, I'm going to do this using my iPad. I will connect the iPad to the computer screen, and that'll be, I'm more comfortable doing it that way. So, but I know a lot of you do it on the browser. So, but there seem to be some issues with the Arabic on the browser. I hadn't encountered those before. So anyway, I guess there are no questions. So then I will then go back to my, okay. So boy, solid blue here. Again, you should be familiar, if you are using the browser, you should be familiar with your arrow keys. And in fact, let's go there. The reader settings. So auto link creation, review links when paging. You don't have to do that. We have auto grammar tagging now, so that it'll tag it. It doesn't work for all languages, but it works for the more popular languages at Link, so that it'll tell you if it's a verb. It'll give you a tag, and you can then tag it as a verb or a noun, and that is going to connect to a grammar source so that you can review the verbs or the nouns or the adjectives in that language. No, I'm not sure. Auto link creation, I'm not sure what this does, but let's close that. So, injured, all right. I guess what it means that, oh yeah, it doesn't automatically create it. I like to go with auto link creation. What I was looking for was how to go from blue word to blue word. Obviously, when I do this on my iPad, I just use my finger or my stylus. But here, I'm using the arrow keys. And in the case of languages that go from right to left, it's a little counterintuitive. You're going to the right, but actually going to the left, if you understand what I mean. So I hit this key, and it takes me to the next word, and I'm using the left arrow key and the right arrow key to go to the left in the case of Arabic. So this is something that you could be doing. You know, I like to go through, remove, as I say, remove the blue words, get it all yellow so that I can go through it once again and then look at the hints that I've got saved for the yellow. You'll notice that there aren't many phrases here because I'm still trying to make sense of the text. Once I get to the point where I want to go and mine it for phrases that I can use, then I'll go through it, yet another time. So I guess the gist of what I wanted to say today was that you can use your linking in many ways. Some people think that it's just, you're going to save the word and eventually you're going to learn the word. And what happens if I moved it to known and now I don't know it again? None of that matters. You can always re-link a word. And eventually, I think it's very useful to go back in and just link a bunch of phrases and then working with your flashcards, review those phrases in the different, types of activities that we have. Again, if we go to the review settings, you can set what you want to do. You can do flashcards, and within that, you can set, what you want to have show up on those flashcards, phrase, translation, no, reverse flashcards. So there's a lot of flexibility. You can also look at however many cards per session that you want. So, maybe I'll take it up to 30. But I find that the closed tests are very good, but in Arabic, it's sometimes the sentences are quite long and the font becomes quite small, and I find it difficult. So close that. So if we then had a look at that, now obviously I have a ton of, another thing one should look at here is, if you don't if you don't like the dictionary definition that's sitting there, you can always check, because that might have come from Google Translate, which isn't always. So this seems to be quite different from the Google Translate translation, so that now I will have to go in and, I think it said something like that. I tend to trust the Context Reversal Dictionary. What did they say again? Budget for it. We'll see. When I go through the text myself, then I'll see which one of these makes the most sense. Now we're running close to our deadline, but so wa sahab, I have no idea. Wa sahab, text companions. Oh, and will. So, the hint is wa, so it's and. Maybe. We'll see what happens. Wrong. Companions. All right. Anyway, I just wanted to give you, it's a little difficult for me to pretend that I'm doing this with everybody watching, but I'm going to stop this now. Stop the screen sharing. All right. So, a little bit of a schmozzle this morning because I had some difficulty navigating the browser version. As I say, I always do it on my iPad. But the point I wanted to make is that I find two things really. Number one, that I think there are two types of sort of stages, if you want. There's the steep climb when we're trying to get a hang of the language. And then there's that long period of trying to gain more words. So you need to get that initial traction to get a sense of how the language works. Those are the mini stories, the easier content that you have to go over many, many times, where you can go in and relink phrases, relink words, and where you're forever surprised at how much you've forgotten of stuff that you actually thought you knew. And so, but you're gaining more and more traction. Then the second phase is acquiring more and more words so that eventually you can be listening to interesting stuff. That's a long road, and that's where you're going at material that has a high percentage of blue words. But in both cases, you should have a flexible approach to using your links. You can go in and say, I know this, go back in and say, I don't know it, create phrases, and so forth and so on. So let me now have a look at the questions that I might have very quickly. So just a second. How would you classify your Polish, Mr. Steve? My Polish is what I would call potential. In other words, I can understand a lot of what I hear. I can understand a lot of what I read. I have a large vocabulary. I have even worked on those things that are different in Polish than in, say, Russian, Ukrainian, Czech. I would have difficulty right now speaking, but if I were to spend, I would say, a few hours with my mini stories, I would be doing fine. And I would have enough traction, comprehension that I could get into a conversation. And then if I were in a Polish environment, my Polish would come along just fine. So I like to classify some of my languages as potential. So I'm kind of B1 to B2 potential with a large vocabulary. Mr. Steve, use any notebook or just by computer, stuff like that? I don't know what is meant by notebook. I don't write things down, if that's what's meant. I simply use Link, but I also have some textbooks because I sometimes find it pleasant. I think variety is good. So, you know, on my iPad, read a book, this kind of thing. How many hours do you study a day? Well, I have to admit that I'm stepping it up now because we have this 90-day challenge. So I think I'm probably, depending on the day, I might listen for an hour or so, and then probably spend another hour or so linking, reviewing, that kind of thing. What is your advice to someone learning Russian from an English perspective? Okay, obviously, you know, whether it's an English perspective or a French or a Spanish perspective, the first thing is you're dealing with the complexity of Slavic languages, the case endings, the verbs of motion, the aspects of verbs, things of this nature. I think my approach to Russian was that the rules, there are so many rules that it's difficult to remember the rules. And therefore, I would recommend doing what I did, which is exposing yourself to the language, occasionally referring to the rules, just to satisfy your curiosity. But don't expect to remember the rules. Don't expect to be able to apply them. Don't ignore them. But just expose yourself to as much of the language as you can bear. Link is a good way to do that. And then, yes, consult grammar as appropriate. And that's why in our new system where you can tag words for verb, noun, adjective, and then that is going to take you to a grammar which will give you a quick summary of maybe the declension tables. You look at it, has a bit of an impact, and you go back to your text. And over time, you should be starting to feel that some of these grammar issues become natural to you. And don't underestimate your ability to forget things that you think you have learned. What was the hardest language for you? I get asked that a lot. I have no idea. They're all hard in their own way. Arabic is proving hard. I mean, easy are, for example, any language that's part of the same system. So if you're, you know, Romanian was easy because I had Italian and some Slavic, because there's 25% Slavic words in Romanian. So Romanian was easy. I honestly feel that all languages are easier now for me than they were before. And I attribute that to the fact that Link works better than before and our mini stories. I am strong, total believer in the mini stories in that early stage to get some traction in the language. I mean, I'm going to be speaking in Arabic in half an hour. I have 7,000 words in Arabic. I was speaking in Farsi the other day. I have 1,500 words in Farsi. With Czech, it took me 8 months, and I didn't feel confident even trying to speak until I had a much larger vocabulary. So, okay, what is the hardest language? Would you still recommend doing flashcards if that person doesn't like doing them? No. I sometimes don't do the flashcards, sometimes do them. I think the important thing is to vary what you do things that you enjoy doing. You're going to come across the words in the text anyway. If you want to do some flashcard review, which I like to do from time to time in conjunction with the lesson, do it. If you don't feel like doing it, don't. It depends on your level in the language, your inclination. I don't see it as a necessity at all. How did you master German grammar? I didn't master German grammar. However, once I stopped trying to memorize the declension tables, my German improved a lot because I was no longer sort of inhibited and trying to think, is it this or that form? And if you expose yourself to enough of the language, some of these things start to come out naturally, and in time your accuracy improves. And every so often you refer to the table, and it has some impact. It's all part of that learning process, but it's not mastery. Mastery is not the word that I would use. You gradually get better. Russian with Max. Steve, do you still practice all the language you learn on a regular basis? No, I wish I could, but there is no way. I mean, if your goal is to become perfect if I wanted to become perfect in Russian, I would spend all my time on Russian. But I'm not that interested in becoming perfect in Russian. I don't live in Russia. I'm not a simultaneous interpreter. I'm interested in the fact that I have been able to gain some exposure to Russian culture, Russian movies, Russian books. I can follow people on YouTube in Russian, and now I want to be able to do that in Arabic and Farsi as well. So with all the mistakes and problems and stuff, if I can access another language and culture, that just adds so much to my sort of world perspective. I'm not that interested in becoming perfect, and certainly I'm not in a position to practice all these languages all the time. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Oh, we're up to ever since I stopped going through Link, I got more viewers. Anyway, that's it. No more questions. All right. I hope that was helpful, and I look forward to your comments. Bye for now.